When we last left our hero, Anne, her father was in financial trouble. Kellynch Hall was being leased out, and Sir Walter, Miss Elizabeth, and Anne were moving to Bath. Admiral and Mrs. Cross were going to lease Kellynch Hall, and Mrs. Croft's brother is Anne's former fiancé. So the setup, I thought, from the previous video was that Anne was alone because her one true love is gone because of her, because she allowed people to persuade her not to marry him. Anne was also mistreated by her family, whose vanity made them unable or unwilling to see how wonderful she is. Add the loss of her mother to the mix, and we're rooting for Anne to find love and happiness, and to get away from those people who really aren't worthy of her time or presence. So picking up the story, the family is about to move to Bath in about a month. Lady Russell wanted to delay when Anne would leave. She thinks Anne's dad and sister won't let her do much in Bath, so she thinks that Anne should stay at Kellynch until Christmas, when Lady Russell is going to go to Bath herself, and she can take Anne with her. Now, something that kind of struck me, and I'm almost certain that this is not what Jane Austen meant, but it seems to me that Lady Russell is almost sabotaging Anne. She sees Anne as almost a reincarnation of Anne's mother, her best friend. And I can't help but wonder, does she convince Anne not to marry Captain Wentworth or Charles Musgrove, and then try to keep Anne at Kellynch for as long as possible, because she kind of sees Anne more as her bestie, the reincarnation of Lady Elliot, and so she thinks she's doing the best thing for Anne, but instead she's kind of picking the wrong thing for Anne for her own sake. Like I said, I'm pretty sure this is not what Jane Austen was thinking when she wrote Lady Russell's character. And most of the analysis that you see about Persuasion says that Lady Russell is a confidant of Anne's, and she is there to give Anne good advice because Anne's family gives bad advice and is just really horrible people. So I'm probably the only one who sees this, but it's just a thought that came to my mind as I was reading. So back to the story. Lady Russell wants Anne to stay as long as possible because she's going to miss Anne. I mean, she's going to miss everybody else too, but most especially Anne. But Anne thinks it's really a better decision to go to Bath. She thinks it would be easier on everybody if she just went. But then Mary decided she was unwell, as she often was, and she believed that she would be unwell through autumn. So of course she needs Anne to come to Uppercross Cottage for as long as she needs Anne. So she talks to Elizabeth, who thinks that no one's going to really want Anne in Bath, so it's okay that Anne stays and helps Mary. Anne is happy that somebody thinks of her as being useful, even though it's really kind of a backhanded compliment. So let's talk about Mary for a second. She may not be quite as vain as her dad and Elizabeth, but she's still vain. We're also told that if she's treated correctly, treated the way she believes that she should be, then she's a really nice person to be around. But the slightest slight from somebody makes her go into a really bad mood. So she has kind of thin skin. And this is how Anne found her the day she got to Uppercross Cottage, which is a place Anne knows very well. When Anne gets to Uppercross, Mary's lying on the sofa, claiming to be very ill. But almost immediately she starts feeling better, and curiously, she doesn't get sick again for the rest of Anne's visit. Anne's kind of enjoying her visit, but there is this one issue with it. Mary liked to complain about everybody, about her husband Charles, about her husband's parents, and then Charles went to Anne and talked to Anne about Mary and was hoping that she could help him have Mary change the way she acts sometimes. And the Musgroves, Mary's in-laws, would also complain to Anne about Mary. So basically everybody was complaining about Mary, except Mary, of course. She's complaining about everybody else. But soon after she gets to Mary's, Admiral and Mrs. Croft move to Kellynch Hall and come to visit the Musgroves. On the visit, Admiral Croft tells everyone that Mrs. Croft's brother is coming for a visit. Okay, so is this where the story is going? Frederick will come to visit, and he and Anne will rekindle their relationship and live happily ever after? Or at least get engaged or married, since that's really where Jane Austen's stories tend to end. Soon after the announcement of Frederick's visit, he comes to the Musgroves and seems to spend a lot of time there. The Musgroves are happy to have him visit because In keeping with the idea of this being a really small world that they live in, it seems that Frederick Wentworth was the captain of the ship that the Musgroves' misbehaved and not very well liked son served on before he died. He died on the ship, I believe. The Musgrove's son, Richard, like I said, was not very well behaved, and the Musgroves didn't really think much of him. Even when he died, they didn't really think much of him. But upon hearing that Captain Wentworth was coming, and that he was the captain of their son's ship, and that he was nice to their son before he died, made them change their opinion of their son. And now they really want to thank Captain Wentworth for all that he did for their son before his death. So Anne's one true love is coming. She hasn't seen him in years, and she knows that she broke his heart, and she's really curious what he thinks now. We quickly find out what he thinks. He's completely hurt by Anne still. He cannot forgive her for breaking off the engagement. He can only muster cold politeness towards Anne. As you can imagine, this hurts Anne considerably, but at least now she knows where she stands with him. The Musgroves have 2 daughters, Henrietta and Louisa. The sisters are quite taken by the captain and seem to be very interested in him. We find out that the captain is ready to marry and is willing to entertain any woman between 15 and 30. Anyone except for Anne, of course. Captain Wentworth spends a lot of time visiting the sisters. And unfortunately for Anne, she has to go to a lot of these dinner parties where the sisters really try hard to get Captain Wentworth's attention. The sisters Musgrove are so taken with him that Henrietta has forgotten about Charles Hayter, her suitor. She ignores Charles if he's over there when Captain Wentworth is there, almost as if she doesn't even notice that he's in the same room. She's almost like, Charles who? After 2 months at Uppercross, Lady Russell is due to return and bring Anne back to Kellynch, before eventually they both go to Bath. Anne is so ready to leave. She cannot be there any longer around Captain Wentworth. She knows that unfortunately she'll probably run into him when she's at Kellynch, but since he spends so much time with the Musgroves, she figures it won't be that much, and maybe she can kind of avoid him. Okay, so maybe the story isn't quite going the way I thought it was when Wentworth first came to Kellynch. But then again, maybe it still is. Exhibit 1. The first time Anne and Frederick find themselves alone was an accident when he came to Uppercross Cottage because he was told that the sisters Musgrove were there. While waiting for the sisters, Frederick stands by a window looking out and ignoring Anne. Eventually Charles Hayter came in, and then Anne's nephew, Walter, came in. Walter, being a little boy, was misbehaving and ignored Anne's insistence that he stop what he was doing. One of the things he was doing was climbing all over Anne. And little boys' knees and elbows can really hurt when they climb all over you. So Anne really wanted him to stop. Charles Hayter ordered Walter to stop, but he was ineffective. Then Frederick says nothing, but snatches Walter up off of Anne to save her from him. Anne was so surprised that she couldn't find the words to thank him. But that was okay because Frederick talked so loudly to the boy, probably on purpose, so that he couldn't hear Anne thank him. Exhibit 2. One day, Anne went for a walk with Mary and the sisters Musgrove. Charles, Mary's husband, and Frederick ran into the ladies and joined them, and really wished she was not on this walk at this point. But here she is. On a side note, could there be more Charleses in this story? We've got Charles Hayter, Charles Musgrove, Little Charles. It's starting to get confusing which Charles I'm talking about. Anyway, they walk a pretty long way and eventually find their way to Charles's aunt's house, called Winthrop. This is also Charles Hayter's home. When they get to Winthrop, Charles, Musgrove that is, and Henrietta go to visit their aunt. The others stay back and kind of hang out in a garden. While waiting, Anne accidentally hears a conversation with Louisa and Frederick. Frederick tells Louisa a story about a nut that makes it clear he cares for people who know their own minds and don't allow anyone to persuade them from their desires. Ouch! He also finds out that Charles Musgrove asked Anne to marry him and that she turned him down also. The Musgroves think that this was probably Lady Russell's doing. and that they wish Anne had married Charles rather than Mary. It seems that everyone thinks Anne is easily persuaded. Ouch, again. She also noticed that Wentworth was a little too curious about this news. Then on the way back, the group runs into the Crofts, who were coming back from a ride. They offer Anne a ride back because they think she looks pretty tired. Before she could say no, Frederick said nothing but took her hand and led her into the carriage. She felt like he placed her there because he felt her fatigue and he desired for her to have some rest. Being the oldest of the ladies in the group at the advanced age of 27, she must have been exhausted from such a trek. For Anne, this little act showed that his feelings for her lingered in spite of their past and the way he seemed to be courting Louisa. Anne was conflicted by his actions. She was happy to see that he really maybe doesn't hate her as much as he comes across as hating her. But it was also kind of hurtful because she doesn't see that they have a future, and it looks like he's probably going to wind up marrying Louisa. But now I'm back to thinking the two of them might get together by the end.